Nice.
Yeah.
Live. All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to ReactJS Denver, our May 2017 edition. Have an exciting lineup of 2 lightning talks and another talk that I'll give later on. And who here is new to ReactJS? I see a lot of new faces.
To this meetup? Yeah.
Wow, that is awesome. Like most of the people here. So thank you for coming. I hope this is a good introduction to the group. Slow clap. We have a talk on Reason from Will Beard, a talk on Now by the Zeit people by Andy Inamorato, and a talk on Functional UI by myself, Will Klein. Before we get into all that, I want to see if there's make some announcements and talk about who's hiring and all that. So if you're new here, the men's room is right outside that door, and the ladies' room is around the building on the other side of the elevator. So you can just go around and walk around your office over that side. There's water and soda and beverages in the kitchen and pizza. I think we have plenty. So please fill yourselves up, grab seconds between the talks, and make yourselves at home. So tonight's meetup is sponsored, as always, by Granicus, who are upstairs a couple floors, and Crown Peak, whose office you are in. Thanks, Crown Peak, for the food and the venue and for volunteering to host. Melissa Catt and Sam Lindstrom, both great volunteers that have helped put together tonight's meetup. So what else? So some things going on. I've got the Dinosaur.js conference homepage up here, and I heard we have a Steve Kinney in the room that has an announcement to make.
Hi, my name is Steve. I am one of the organizers. Although I guess everyone doesn't have to green in there. I'm one of the organizers of Dinosaur.js, which is this fancy pants website. I think it's an Ember app, so don't miss it. You can navigate around it now, which is last time I was here, it had an unusable UI, so that's good. But yeah, that's still there. So what it says for JS, it is a community-run JavaScript conference on June 15th and 16th in the city of Denver in the state of Colorado. Last year was 1 day, and we had a day full of talks. This year it's actually 2 days. So we have a day full of talks from our keynote speakers are Tom Dale, one of the creators of Ember, Monica on the Polymer team, Laurie Voss, who's the COO now of NPM, talks on performance, talks on a bunch of really cool, bringing, Tom's talk is, for instance, not about Ember. It's about all desktop era frameworks and bringing them into the mobile era and how we think about our compilers to create different bundles where, hey, I've got a super fast phone and no internet versus I have an old phone and consistent internet and how we actually think about that. So a bunch of really great talks from Retail Me Not about performance experiments in the real world, talks on conversational UIs, really great stuff on the first day in the more traditional talk format. On the second day, we are going to try out long-form workshops. Normally, for conferences, long-form workshops cost money extra in addition to the conference ticket. For us, they're completely free for anyone with a conference ticket, which I decided not to raise prices on the conference tickets. So that was short-sighted on my part. But you win. So on the second day, we've got talks on machine learning for beginners. We've got a talk on Redux sagas by Greta over in the back. We've got talks on accessibility, basics and beyond. Talks on one of the talks I love is called Design for Developers: How to Make Your App Not Look Like Garbage. Trying to think of what the other ones are. There's a bunch of other really great talks that I'm really, really super proud of. We've got developers from Microsoft coming out, as well as a few others. Special things, I got stickers here. I will leave them I think on that back table over there. We are selling out of tickets. We sold out of tickets last year. We expect to do the same this year. So if you would like to come, you should do that. We have some discount codes for you tonight. If you use, I think it's good for the next, till the end of the week, or I might have made it till Monday, but let's assume I made it to the end of the week. If you use the code REACT, don't tell anyone. That's good for 15% off. We're also, as of today, there was a lot of people asking about workshop-only tickets. So we have workshop-only tickets for half the price. But if you're a student or like unemployed graduate or something along those lines, you can use the code student and get 40% off those tickets. So that's like really cheap. Basically, we lose money on you at that point. We basically lose money on almost everyone anymore. Sponsors. This is not a for-profit business. And we also, two things that we have is one, speaking of it not being a for-profit business, we're always looking for sponsors. So if you want to, if you're hiring or something along those lines, or just want to get involved in the community and get your company name out in front of a bunch of really great developers and speakers, definitely talk to me or email roar@dinosaurjs.org. Alternatively, we're also offering diversity scholarships. So those will be free tickets, and that's a application that I will send out. But also we're looking for, if like your company is interested in sponsoring diversity scholarship, we want to give out as many of those as we can. Definitely talk to me as well. Here's our very good looking speaker lineup. Tom is very handsome. Oh yeah, and we have IoT.js workshop where you'll learn how to like hack on hardware, but also learn about serverless architecture along the way, which is pretty cool. Conversational UIs, one day we'll all be front-end developers. Like we're biased on that one. You know, it's hit or miss because like there's nothing like having a Ruby developer on your JavaScript team. It's okay. Atomic design is migration strategy. Some art and code talks. Going down a little bit more, Larry Voss's talk from NPM is 25 talks on scaling in 25 minutes. I personally have seen him give that talk in 2.5 hours, so I'm interested to see it in 25 minutes. Lon talking about performance experiments in production. Miles is on TC39 and is now a developer for Google Cloud. He's talking about like some war stories from working on the Node project and perils of collaborating with jerks. And then Francesca works at Google on the V8 team and implements the JavaScript engine. So she's talking a little bit about how JavaScript engines work. So I think a lot of like really great things, and more stuff will appear there as people get in their bios on time. Brenna did get me her bio on time. So she's fine. Actually, there's a line and it's like something, fill in the blank here, and I have to write that.
I didn't even do that.
Cool. So I'm gonna throw some stickers around, but definitely if you're interested in sponsoring or attending or getting a good scholarship, like the mailing list is where we're sending out all of those kind of information. But yeah, I would love to see you all there. And I think it's I'm really like proud of the lineup. Cool. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Super terrific conference. If you're here and you're not going, there's no excuse not to go. I went last year. It's fantastic. Go this year.
You also get cool t-shirts.
Yes, you also get cool t-shirts. Yes. Cool. I think other announcements. Full Stack Meetup has something the night before.
That's the Mozilla Developer Roadshow, where we actually have a bunch of like Mozilla coming in and doing a bunch of stuff. And we're also trying to organize some stuff with some other meetups, so we have something going on every day that week. And pulling in some speakers, so
nice.
That's also a thing that we're organizing.
Let us know if you need us to move our meetup up a week to fit that week. To do that. Awesome. Cool. Any other community announcements, anyone? All right. Who's hiring? Sam.
So Crown Peak is actually looking for 2 experienced .NET engineers, .NET developers, whatever you want to call them. If you know of anybody, or if you know .NET yourself and would like to work with us here on the 38th floor, talk to me.
Yeah, super awesome team. I've been here for a year. Really great group of people who are just the most supportive group that I've gotten to learn from ever. So terrific company. Anybody else hiring? Is anybody looking for a job? Eric.
Yes. Okay, I wasn't expecting to make a self-introduction. This happens all the time. Yeah, my name is Eric. Eric with a K. Don't forget it. People get it wrong all the time, though, so I don't mind too much. I've had a long and complicated road to get to where I am now, which includes like 3 years of computer science at Mines, and then Turing, and then some months of working here. Here at Crown Peak, and then I have been trying to get back into having a job for a few months now. Nothing has quite worked, and I'm not sure why exactly, other than I don't think I really learned how to make friends. So, which is a weird thing to admit in public like that. But anyway, so I've got familiarity with a bunch of technologies. My main strength is really that I can pretty much understand how anything works with enough time. Okay.
Nice.
Thank you. Eric's a wonderful person. Please get to know him, be his friend. Who else? I saw some hands back there. Hey.
So my name's Sarah with an H. Followed on that. And I just finished a 6-month stint in a contract with Galvanize, and so I'm a junior dev and I'm looking for some place to learn and develop. So yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
And also, I graduated in Galvanize. I graduated in December. And I learned Angular 2. I'm into React now. And I've been touching a little bit of Python and also learning C#. So also learn a lot.
Awesome. Anyone else? So I'm looking. I just moved up to Longmont with my family, and so it's not that close to Denver, and looking for something remote full time. So if anyone knows anything that's hiring remote, whether it's here in Colorado or elsewhere, I'm interested. Please get in touch. I think that covers it. Cool. So with that, I'll turn it over to Will Beard to talk about Reason. Give it up for Will.
Don't applaud yet. Yeah, I don't have that kind of power.
You don't?
Board. No.
What do you have?
Well, there's 5 pens.
Did you know that this is an HDMI port?
Yeah. I'm talking about the power.
Oh, do you need power?
Yeah, I'm at 13%. Been working on the slide deck.
Did you not bring your adapter?
No,
Go fast.
You didn't bring your adapter.
I didn't.
Does somebody have a MacBook adapter that's
Sure, nobody does.
previous generation?
Old, the previous generation? Sorry, yeah, yeah.
Like the cloud?
What year is that?
Oh, your slide's online. Oh, your slides are online. You can just use mine.
What's your PowerPoint? Yeah, that one.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. Oh no, that's perfect. Promise to return it. Got it. Cool.
All right.
Cool. I'll get there. Oh, I guess that's not very useful anyways. Okay. So, hi. My name is William Beard. The bird at the Will Beard, that means Twitter. So you can follow me there if you so choose. And today, just a quick preface. I started writing Reason last Friday, so I'm an expert, and I'm here to tell you all about it. This is a lightning talk, which means it'll be maybe 5 to 10 minutes, hopefully around in there. At least that's the goal. So yeah, if you want to find any these slides or any resources that I talk about, you can find my gist under here. It's the last one that I made. So yeah, let's talk about Reason. Reason is a thin language or a layer on top of OCaml. For those not familiar with OCaml, it's this really, I would describe it right now as a very clunky, hard to learn language, but I'm getting there. But it's also a lot of fun, right? Like we get to learn new ways of solving problems. That's something that I like about it. And really what it is it's a new workflow where you can write Reason or really OCaml and compile to JavaScript or just native bytecode. So one of the first questions that I asked one of the contributors to Reason was, why do I want to write my front-end code in OCaml? There's really not a good answer for why a company would, other than for the lulz, right? Like, we all love learning, and it's, like I said before, it's really fun to learn how to solve similar problems, but in different ways. But really, why? It's statically typed, so we don't have to use Flow, we don't have to write TypeScript. Types is something that's built directly into the language. And as a JavaScript developer for a long time, that's become more and more important to me over time. It's functional, but there are side effects for a good reason. It compiles to JavaScript. Another reason why, like, why would you write a language that doesn't compile to JavaScript these days? And it's got a really comprehensive set of tools. One of the problems that usually comes along with languages like this is that they lack proper tooling. They lack really good documentation. This has that, so that's why. So the other reason why, one of the biggest reasons why, is because it's really easy to write React components. I picked this up and I wrote a React component within minutes. That's a lie. Actually, like an hour, which I mean is 60 minutes. So technically, outside of, I mean, really, I don't have to cover anything of maybe these box lines, but like this right here looks familiar. If you write React at your job, that doesn't look strange. So it's a completely different language, yet we can write in JSX, and it looks very similar. So let's go over, and if you want to follow along on your laptop, more than welcome to. Let's go over how to get running as quickly as possible. Dear future self, yarn add does not work. So let's go to the JavaScript workflow. So if you go to this address right here, you can follow along on JS workflow. You can follow these steps. And what it gives you is a repo that looks like this. So we have a really simple way of logging, some sort of string to the console. We don't do that except when we debug, but hey, what the heck. So that's a line of reason. The other thing that you might notice here is this BS config. It doesn't stand for maybe what you mean initially. What you initially think. Bucket script is what that's for. So that's a really easy way to get started. It's literally that easy. We write this, we write that, and then we have a way of compiling that reason to JavaScript, and that's with that command right there. So if you want to think about it, buckle script is kind of like Babel for reason. It's not a direct translation, I think, but it's similar, right? It's like you're writing, ES 2025, and you're compiling it to JavaScript. So buckle script is a pretty big deal. You need it in order to successfully go from reason to JavaScript. So then to get to the meat of it, Reason React, this is a library that essentially lets you express React components with JSX, and then it goes from JSX to like React.create element, similar to how Babel works, and then helps you to bind to React. So let's move on from here. I'm not going to go, since this is a lightning talk, I don't want to live code and fumble around, because I'm sure that I will. So we're going to bust out the Easy Bake Oven and go to some pre-built stuff. So if we follow the link to this repo, so Cheng Lu, I'm not 100% how to pronounce his last name. Genius guy. He has a couple talks on Reason and a couple of very meta talks that are really interesting perspectives on why you would want to go to Reason and why Reason is probably the future, if you will. So if you clone this repo, you run a couple commands, you're running some JavaScript. You're running JavaScript in your browser. So let's do that. I will live build. Oh, it's already going. Actually. So this is React. This is an HTML file using Webpack and serving a JavaScript file. If we want to go take a look at what that syntax looks like. It's really similar to what I was showing you before. So we go to the simple, we have this page. So this page is a React component. It has a render method that renders a div that has an onClick. I mean, this all looks really familiar. It's not, I find this really easy to read.
Can you zoom in, Will?
What's that?
Can you zoom in on it?
Yeah, of course. Enhance.
Thank you.
Enhance. So we're fully enhanced now, and so this is a really simple example. It's a div that has some sort of message in there. This message is passed down from, I don't know, why don't we just call this a container? Why not? Here's a message just getting passed down to the page component. So all very familiar. We have a single command that will compile your reason to JavaScript. And then we have our very familiar, beloved Webpack that will bundle it all up and give you a file to work with in the browser. A really cool example is the to-do MVC app. So this is a fully, wow, it looks great. This is a fully implemented to-do. Everybody's probably familiar with it. It's really accessible. So give talk. I'll add a to-do. Maybe I'll refresh it. Oh, wow, it doesn't go away. That's really cool. So there's some interesting code in these examples. I would really recommend going over some of this because it gets outside of the comfortable React land and it gets more into the OCaml or reason syntax, which is where a lot of the complication is. It's really easy to write JSX. I take it back. It's not as difficult to write JSX as it is to write the code that you see up here because of how familiar JSX can make reason feel. But this is showing that we can make pretty full-blown apps that can CRUD. We can create to-dos, we can remove them, update them, delete them. And this is a really good example, I think, of how to not just write a React component, but how to write something bigger. So we're gonna wrap it up real quick. Reason. So let's go over some mental mapping. I know JavaScript pretty well, so it helps me a lot whenever I can start relating things in my mind, like what are these tools that I'm using and what can I map them to? So reason is a superset of OCaml. That really doesn't mean anything to me as a JavaScript programmer, but ES 2025, I get it. It's like really experimental syntax. BuckleScript compiles it. So BuckleScript is Babel, but with JS bindings. So as you can probably guess, there's quite a bit missing, or JavaScript has a lot of built-in things like promises, DOM, etc. And BuckleScript provides a good bit of that. The BS config is similar to the package JSON for dependencies and package information. I don't know much more about it outside of that, so if it does more, that's awesome. Reason React is React, but it's Reason. And then buckle types is something that I haven't really gone over. Buckle types are JS bindings, which are kind of like polyfills. They give you a way to talk in JavaScript, but with being able to write in Reason. So React Reason is similar to like a binding, right? Or promises. We have to write bindings for these sorts of things, or for like local storage access, like we saw in the To-Do app. Those all have to be manually bound to JavaScript. Yeah, that's it. So the hard parts that I've run into so far, a lot of the projects are very new and oftentimes in broken states, which can be frustrating when you're getting started. Type errors, if you're coming from JavaScript world and you haven't had experience with statically typed languages, it can be really hard to read. If you've worked with Haskell, it's very similar to Haskell error messages or type errors, and they're just hard to read at first. You get used to it after a while. The other hard part is BuckleScript. Like I mentioned, the compiler that also provides JavaScript bindings. It's documented, but there's not a lot of usage documentation. Hopefully that's changed at some point in time. If you want to follow along with me being terrible at Reason, you can follow this. I'm going to try and write like a Hacker News client fully in Reason and hopefully do camels all the way down, like a unikernel running an OCaml app that's serving this Reason app. It's going to be awesome. Yeah, so thanks.
Thank you, Will.
Yeah.
Andy, you good to go? Yes. Oh yeah. This thing's in there. I'm glad it came
Just
out.
work magically.
Do you need power?
Nope. Juice.
Andy, have you spoken at this meetup yet?
I have not.
Nice. We got a new speaker tonight.
Yeah,
Please introduce yourself if that's already part of your thing.
sure.
After your
Get my
video works.
working.
That's a
There
good
it
sign.
goes. We'll let that finish.
Attention, matter discipline. Fire alarm services is conducting a test on the light safety system in the building. Please disregard all audible and visual alarms until further notice. Thank you.
I actually paid them earlier.
To not do it during your talk?
Yeah.
Wait till you're done?
A proper lightning talk is like 5 minutes, 20 slides, 15 seconds a slide. There's a guy who started this called it Pechakucha Talks, and he was the one that started that, and he trademarked that it was like 10 minutes or 6 minutes and 20 seconds. So lightning talk is like the non-trademarked version of that. So now that we know we're about to, catch on fire and we only have 5 minutes to speak, that'll put some juice in my talk, I guess. Part of the reason why I like this little tool that these guys made, guys and ladies made, is the last place I worked prior to this one, we didn't deploy anything for a whole year. The whole company just went in the tank, worked on stuff, nothing ever went public. And especially as a web developer, there's almost no greater feeling, right, than pushing something out to a public URL, sending it out, posting it on Facebook and saying, hey, I did this thing. I want it now. I want my code out there now. As a client, I want stuff out there now, right? Why are we waiting so long? Isn't that the whole point of what we're doing? Get it in front of people? Of course it is. So how do you do that? If you haven't heard of Zyteco or Zyte, it was started by Guillermo Rauch, who's the guy behind Socket.io, the open source project that kind of, I think, popularized WebSockets, and some other very smart folks there. And one of the tools they have is this command line app called Now, N-O-W. You can install it with NPM. They actually have a desktop client, which is funny. That's how they recommend you install it because it just keeps the tool up to date. So we have 3.5 minutes left. Let's see if we can deploy 5 apps in the next 3 minutes. All right, so I also cheated a little bit like Will, so we have pre-built stuff. This is just create React app, very bare bones, and I'm just I already built it, so I'm gonna go into build. Can everybody see that? Okay, make it a little bigger maybe. And we are gonna deploy this thing just by typing now. So I don't know, it's a cool tool. It does a bunch of stuff for you, even copies it to the clipboard. We're gonna go over here to the browser and type it in, paste it in. Hey, look at that, a little material UI button. Deployed in 2 seconds. Granted, it was just static JavaScript, but it's a public URL. It's even got a HTTPS, which is kind of fun. All right, so that was one. Let's come in here again. Let's check out a different tag. And I'll share all my notes in the little repo, not that there's a whole lot going on here. All right, so we're again pre-built, but just for fun, let's force the issue and try and build this thing. It's building, thinking about it anyway, go Webpack, go. Oh, how long does it take to build a Reason project? Is it just as fast as anything else?
Yeah.
Sweet. There you go.
It's so fast.
All right, so we're going to deploy another app, another second. You can see the URL change. One cool thing about this, these things are immutable. I'll show you here in a second, how they show that to you. But here's a slightly prettier Now app. Boom. 2 seconds later, we have a nicer looking app. You can send that to your mom. Hey, Mom, look what I did today. Awesome. All right, let's go grab another one. And that was cool, but notice how we had to yarn build ourselves and then type now. We don't have 2 commands. We're lazy developers. Let's try this version, which is going to kind of do this for us. Notice that it copies it to the clipboard. I should have changed, I think, the way that looked, but once this is finished, you're going to see it actually go in. One cool thing is that as this runs, it kind of tells you at the URL, so you can watch it. An important part about that is whatever you deploy there is open source under their free plan. So like, don't deploy your, 1Password unencrypted stuff or whatever. But it's pretty fun. You get to watch it build, and then here in a couple seconds, it'll be done. So we'll let that kind of churn in the background. The nice other thing is that those things live forever. They're immutable. So if you want to like deploy 2 different versions and show product, here's A and B right beside each other, you can do that. It's a different URL for each one. If we come over here and we run, let's run now ls. We'll get the list of, so you can see there's like 3 different versions of that. That's the 3 things that we deployed. We come back here, I think that one is done, or maybe not, still churning. But this is like a Go project that I did at home like 4 months ago. And so just to fool around with Go a little bit. And that one was still alive. All I had to do is hit that URL and it turned itself on. You can even deploy through their API. So like in this case, the actual code that's going to be deployed is right here. And we'll try that. And that's going to run too. Let's see if our other one's done. Okay, there's our other ones. That was the 1 command version of it, which is just a slight tweak to your package JSON to tell it to build a little better. Hey, look at that. We just deployed another app in like 2 seconds. That's cool too. And what's really amazing is you can also deploy Docker files or Docker containers. So you can dream up something funky like Katura. I'm not sure if anyone's heard of that. This is a Swift-based server-side web framework running on now. If I go back and try and redeploy it, like literally I cloned that repo. I made one small tweak, and now I'm going to type now, and it's going to go ahead and deploy it. You can see it here running. Pretty amazing. Like the fact that you're compiling Swift on this cloud service and you just type 3 letters to get that out in the public is pretty fun. So yeah, definitely go check out now, download it, install it, play with it. I'll post these notes so everybody can try this at home. There's alternatives, of course, like Heroku used to be the fun way to do this. You obviously can still use that. GitHub Pages. There's a project called Surge if you've never used that one. Also for like static sites. Netlify, another one that I think just does static. The cool thing about now is you can do static or Docker file crazy stuff. So yeah, thanks Will for letting me talk real quick. I'm Virtual Andy on almost all the social stuff, so feel free to track me down. I'll post the notes on the meetup link. I work at Artifact Uprising. Check that out if you like photos and printing them. I'm also part of the full stack meetups. If you want to talk about how much fun we're going to have before Dino.js, I'd love to tell you more about that. And I have some giveaways. I think after Will talks, we have 10 prepaid year-long codes to frontendmasters.com. So see Will and I, and we'll like ask trivia or something to give those out. Thank you very much.
This is good now. Thank you, Andrew.
Yeah.
David.
Yo. Hey, sorry, I didn't get a chance to introduce myself.
Yeah.
Even
Do you
to
have
you.
something?
Yeah, I have an idea of something I came up with on over here that I thought I could share. So
Yeah. Do you need a computer or anything?
yeah, it's on an interweb site, so I could use a computer or use my own, I guess. In the meantime, I can introduce myself even to you, I guess. Hey, I'm Dave. I am not from Denver. I'm traveling through right now. My wife and I have been doing the digital nomad thing for the past 6 months, and this month's in Denver. So cool. It's happy. I'm happy. It is me. Happy to be here. And I thought I would share something that I came across within the past couple of weeks. Hopefully, it's some sort of help for y'all too. So,
Nope. I'm gonna give you a whiteboard. There you go.
Awesome. Thanks, man. So, yeah, I am a solo developer. I have my own business, and I run my business entirely off product sales. So I don't do any client work or anything. It's all just come up with my own ideas and put it out there into the world. But all this is just due to, I don't have a code background. I'm not a computer science guy, obviously. I actually have a video production background, obviously. But I'm really interested in this stuff, and I've been learning it for a long time. And I didn't go to school for it. I just Googled something long enough, and eventually, after brute forcing, you figure this stuff out. But I love to teach, and I love to share what I've learned along the way. And I think everybody that's in a position to be able to share what you know should probably do that. So anyway, I found this site that I thought was really awesome. It's called Scrimba. Has anybody heard of this yet? No? Cool. So how about CodePen? Everybody heard of CodePen?
Yep.
Okay, so this, the 1 second pitch, and I don't work for this company, I just came across it. 1 second. It would be very difficult to pitch something. So 5 second pitch. It's CodePen, but it's video and it's interactive, which is really neat. So let's just do an example here real quick. I don't know if I need to log in to create. Maybe I do. I'm not going to do that, but we can watch somebody else's. Okay, so what you can do is do a CodePen. So you add your dependencies, external dependencies, CSS, JavaScript, and then you create your files, so index.html with all your DOM structure, whatever. But what's really interesting about it is just like CodePen, you can interact with it, but the creator, you can set up your code however you want to. And then when you're ready to go, there's a little record button in the admin. So you hit record, and it starts recording, not a video, just your audio. And I don't know their wizard technology behind all this stuff, but so it records the audio, and then it'll record all of your changes to the code that's happening here, right? So when you play it back, here's somebody else's.
Welcome to Scrimba.
I don't know who this is. Oh, you know,
Scrimba is a
I met this guy.
groundbreaking way of
So real quick, this guy's from Norway, and I did a video chat with him because he wanted some feedback on the system, and he's just the most handsome-looking dude ever. I was like, oh man, right, coming out to the
learning how to code.
and he's got the accent.
Because what you see in front
So
of
watch
you here
what happens here. This is really neat because, like I said, this is how I learned everything, just through YouTube and video and all this stuff. But what's really neat is that this isn't just a video. It's not just something that's static that you have to watch, but you can actually interact with it.
Not a video. It's an interactive Scrimba screencast. And that means that you, as the viewer of the cast, can at any given time pause it, highlight a piece of text or code, and then change it, for example, to your own name.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you. Okay, so this is perfect. I didn't know he did a welcome to Scrimba. So anyways, it's got a console up here on the right. Okay. So, and we can run it. We can execute everything that's going on here. But so I pause his playback, and I can go in here and I can change his message. I don't like welcome. I like hey. Okay, and then I can play, and obviously, so what it does is render out the result here on the right-hand side in this window. But you have access to the console and everything here. So inside of the JavaScript, depending on what you want to do, you can console log or debug or whatever you need to do, and then see your result over here. But edit it live. So somebody else sets up this tutorial for you, and then you have this idea of like, oh, okay, maybe if I change it to this, is this the result that I might expect, right? So it's kind of this interactive playbackable CodePen.
You can then run the code and see how your changes affects the output.
That's what I said.
Another benefit of Scrimba is that it's super easy to create. You simply head over to the Scrimba website and start typing while you're talking, just as I'm doing now.
Anyway, it's really a neat little program. I could play it. It's only a minute long, so I guess I'll play through it. And he's a good-looking guy, so I might as well. But but what's really interesting is this is all just open source stuff in terms of all the code that you upload. There's no like private playbacks or anything. So if I wanted to, if I logged in or whatever, I can fork this guy's screencast and have access to his end result of whatever he made, and then re-record audio and maybe add on my own ideas right on top of it and be able to record and share with everybody else. So anyway, this is a newer platform, I think within the past 3 to 4 months, and they're still gaining a lot of traction. But I think in terms of the direction that online tutorials go in the way of learning online in code, this is going to be a huge thing that you'll see in the next year or two. So I just want to introduce it to you and also introduce myself because I don't know anybody here. But if you're interested in this kind of stuff, or teaching, or learning, or want to talk more about travel or running a business, let's do it. So thanks.
Yeah. That was as lightning as it gets. I'll just talk on the way here, and then just pull up the browser and just go. So before I get started, I want to give everyone a chance to grab a drink, grab another bite to eat. I think there's plenty of pizza, plenty of drink. So please take a couple minutes to do that.
Sorry. Hi, Andy. I'm
Hi.
Daria.
Hey, Daria, nice to meet
Nice
you.
to meet you. I don't know if you remember each other, but like maybe like
Okay. Oh, sweet.
Yeah,
Cool.
yeah, your
Well,
company
nice to
was
meet
in
you in
that.
person.
I know. I saw in your terminal virtual. I knew. Oh, that's
Yeah.
Andy. Okay, cool.
Right. Yeah,
How's
great
life
to meet
in
you.
Arkansas?
It's good. Yeah, it's good. It's busy, but good. Yeah.
What year does it?
Yeah, I'm.
Are you getting a drink?
Yeah, I was going to
Yeah.
walk over there. Yeah, I'm an engineer. We have 5.
Worth a shot. Absolutely. No, I'm just, I'm glad to see your resume and stuff, but at the same time, I don't. Yeah. So, yeah. To like leave there. So. I tell you, since I got out of the street,
Well, how was that?
like those jobs just don't tell you. They seem to- There's so many.
It's supposed to be so nice, right?
Yeah, you know,
Oh my God.
especially if you're fun.
Yes.
Not discouraging if you continue down that route because
Which place? I want to order with you.
I haven't seen John's like every now and then going,
Oh,
John
yeah.
looks check stuff out. Like,
You and me and Trailing
just been that jobs all over the place. So.
Wow.
But I appreciate you
Trailing's epic.
talking to me about it at the very least. 'Cause, yeah, exactly. That's what you gotta do.
And she's like, you know, she
Actually, just hired
awesome.
junior on that. Just this week. But keep coming to these. I mean, because it very well may be that
How did you use them?
maybe
They had it signed up, so you know,
Yeah, I want to look this up. You and
Or whatever.
I thought for a second you said entrails. It's like,
trails are available, but only if you speak Chinese.
how do you spell it?
or feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn or wherever. So, Sam. Sam.
Sam.
Yep, and it's Paul, right?
Y-U-U-N.
Paul. Unofficial reach, I think, yeah, it's a less.
I think I did, yeah.
Good to officially reach out, yeah, definitely.
Come on. No, I really want to find it.
I remember that. I with Dr. Bowman.
How's the spelling?
Really, Lindstrom or Lindstrom? You know, there's a hockey player,
I just
famous
love this
Red
kind of
Wings
stuff.
player.
Yeah.
I'm there, it'll be like-
But I'm a Lindstrom.
Greatest defender ever.
Are you a Red Wings fan?
Yes, I am.
Yeah, I couldn't tell.
Yeah.
I don't really care that much about hockey, but.
No, I'm not.
You were
We'll see.
Yeah.
Well, they were.
Yeah, I was in super into hockey when they were, whenever they were good.
Yeah, I was an Avalanche fan.
Really?
And that was kind of the rivalry. What would they just like?
Yeah, because that guy broke the other guy's face.
You're Chinese and just ask.
Yeah, that's right.
But for everybody else, they get
So it's important that you.
Yeah.
I want you to real fast.
Yes, that's the last name.
No, I just clicked in the that's not how it
Oh, shit. Wait,
I thought you said that happened, or maybe you said it to someone else.
No, someone else might be.
it's a very, it's pretty ubiquitous. I think my family was.
Yeah.
I don't think they were.
What is one that you kind of typical Friday?
They're usually made them that often.
He's got so hot. At least that tells us the reason has to have a good personal supervision.
Yeah, thanks for doing this. Like I said, no, I see this in my shirt.
Sorry.
Get out.
You did do it like right towards
I saw this guy, I'm like, oh, I don't want to see him in his face. Which doctor was this? Okay,
Yeah, he's coming right back.
thank you.
Oh my God.
So hot right now.
He's playing.
Yeah,
Definitely.
hopefully so.
So close.
I'm gonna.
Maybe it's coming.
I was thinking, like, I didn't want to say anything because you press one.
Mishaku. Mishaku? Was that the name? Or what was the name of from doing this?
Oh.
Mishaku.
All right, welcome back. So let me just, I've been working on this talk for a while. I gave a couple of lightning versions of this at Tech Confluence and HTML5 Denver. So I'm trying to expand this into something a little bit more. So I want to offer or ask up front if people have feedback, what they want to hear about, ideas to make it better, come talk to me afterwards. So I would really love some feedback and some input to make this even better. So I'm also going to record it. Cool, I should be recording now. All right, nice. So I am Will Klein, and I also want to mention I've gotten lucky enough to help run the meetup for a while. And I joined Chris Downer almost 2 years ago and putting together this meetup. And Sam, where are you? He's out doing some organizer things. So, so it's like this Sith Lord kind of role. There's always two, right? So first it was Chris, and then there was me, and then Chris moved on, and now there's me and there's Sam. Well, I'm part of moving up to Longmont and kind of not being close to Denver. I won't be as proximate to this meetup, so I want to see if anybody would like to help Sam out with the meetup and become his Sith apprentice. Yeah. So he's been awesome to work with, and he's doing a great job with the meetup. But it's really great when you have a meetup and there's two people to co-organize it. So if one person's out or if you just need a hand, it works out great. So I've had a lot of good fortune come from running the meetup. It got me my job here at Crown Peak. It got me some of my coworkers from the meetup, and we've hired from this group, and it's turned out to be a wonderful experience. So if that interests you at all, talk to Sam. Yeah. Let me get on to my talk. So I'm here today to talk about functional UI. It's so hot right now. Thanks to Will Beard for helping me come up with the title of this. I told him I was going to talk about functional UI, and he's like, "Yeah, it's so hot right now." And I'm like, "Yeah, that's it. That's what I need to do." And so what it's really about, when I say functional UI, I'm talking about two things kind of coming together. So today I'm going to talk about pure functions and taking that from functional programming and kind of explaining what that is and how it relates to UI components. So I have this, I would assume that a lot of you are familiar with this, but some of you are not familiar with this. And I think there's two sides to this. There's one, if you're unfamiliar to this, I think you'll get a better sense of what functional programming is about and how you can start using it and how that relates to UI. And if you are already familiar with this, I know some of you are, hopefully you'll get some more ideas about how to explain these concepts to others. I think there's a lot that can be said for, as David was saying, teaching and sharing ideas. And one of the things I love about coming to these talks is just hearing new ways of explaining things. It helps cement what it means to me, and it helps equip me with better ways to explain to others. So about the first part, functional programming, I think there's a lot to it that is very academic, that's very, there's this pure functional kind of way of thinking, and there's these languages like Haskell and Erlang that they say you should use these things, you should understand things like currying, you should know what a monad is, and there's like all this stuff that comes with it that can be very unfamiliar and very, I don't know, I had a lot of unease getting into it myself, and it took me a while. But I don't think it needs to be that way. And I think there's a lot about functional programming that is very accessible and very useful and very pragmatic that we can bring to our code today. Here at the React meetup and talking about UI components, I think it's ripe for bringing functional concepts into our applications and our UI. The other thing that I kind of want to take out of here is the idea that we have we manage state in our components and our application, and where that lives and how that can be teased apart. So we kind of want to take our components, just smash them open and break them into small pieces that are much more manageable. So before I get into the actual concepts themselves, I have just a couple stories to share. Have to do with some people that have kind of taught me along the way. And I hope this maybe relates to some of my own journey and how I've picked up these concepts. And I think there's some parallels to what I'm going to talk about thereafter. So, what was it, like 5-6 years ago, I got the great fortune to work at an insurance company called Travelers Insurance. And I often joke that when I was in college for a time, I went to college in Connecticut. And everybody there worked at an insurance company because everybody worked for an insurance company in Connecticut. It really is the insurance capital of the world. And I swore it off. Like, insurance sounds really boring. I would never want to do that. And I tried doing some like cool things with game programming and motion capture. And I just kept finding my way back to web programming. It was just what I enjoyed the most. And then one day, after working for a bunch of small companies, I wanted to get a real job working for a bigger company with a real team and like a build pipeline and tests and like an actual team. So I had a friend that worked at Travelers and said it wasn't so bad. So I took him up on interviewing there. Fell backwards into a job that was like 5 years expert JavaScript. That was what the job description was, and I was totally not 5 years expert JavaScript. I was more like 5 years novice jQuery. I really don't know JavaScript kind of developer. But they took a chance on me. I got into it, and I got to work with these two guys, Buzz Decaf and Cross-Eye. It's Michael Hurley and Scott Soyette. They're two of the original co-authors of Ramda. And if you haven't heard of Ramda, it's a fairly popular library for functional JavaScript. So they hadn't written this yet, but when I worked on their team, they talked to me about, just these ideas of writing more well-organized code and how we could simplify what we were trying to build. And they definitely talked about Haskell and Erlang and those things. But the one thing they related to me that always really stuck was pure functions and how they work and why they're a good idea and how our code can be simpler when we apply them. So big shout out to those two. And there's somebody else in the room here, Matt Parrish. I got to work with at Rally and then CA Technologies when we were acquired. And I'm thinking back to, I had this flashbulb memory of, it was my first few months of the job here in Denver. And I was working with him, pairing on something, and he was one of the people that I got to pair with that would teach me like some of the functional tools. And I think he was getting me acquainted with like map and reduce and some other things like that. And we were taking some very kind of imperative procedural like JavaScript code and trying to make it better. And we played around with some of these functional tools, and at the end of it, we wrote this very, very pure functional bit of 5 lines of code. And we both looked at it and said, wow, this is really functional, but I don't know if I would understand this if I looked at it tomorrow. So we kind of like backtracked on that a little bit. We distilled it into something that was kind of something in between. That's a really crucial point I want to make, that I don't think you need to go all in on functional to write more functional code that gets a lot of the benefits. So let's talk about pure functions. So Eric Elliott, Eric Elliott has a nice blog, and he teaches a lot about JavaScript on the internet. And I like his definition. He's got 3 parts. But the first part I want to start with, a pure function is a function that, given the same input, will always return the same output. So it seems pretty simple. Given A, it's going to take A and add 10 to it and always return A plus 10. It's very predictable and pure. Expanding on that definition, there's a couple other things that are implied or required for that to be the case. And the first, that it must produce no side effects. A pure function doesn't go changing other things elsewhere. It doesn't say try to store something in the server or update our global store or change anything else like that. So it's not going to have side effects. It's not going to do anything but just return a value. That's all it does. And it doesn't rely on any external mutable state. It doesn't try to read from your global state. It doesn't try to call to the server for something. It doesn't try to pull something out of something else. I would even argue it's very you got to be very careful about internal state or anything like that. I would say that you really want no real state. That's not to say that you don't have defaults or anything like that. So here's a really simple pure function. It just takes in a name. It's hello. You say hello, and you pass in a name, and uses a string template to say hello so-and-so. So if you pass in Amelia, it says hello Amelia. And that's my daughter. Here she is. Hello Amelia. So really, really simple. It doesn't do anything but take its input, and given that input, return something else. So let me contrast that with a couple things that are not so pure. So here's a case where we have a variable where we assign to name Amelia, and then we use that variable to return out the value. This seems predictable. It's always going to return hello Amelia unless we do things like change name to something else. So we're relying on external immutable state in this example. And that gets dangerous, because if we do this in our application and anything could potentially change that variable, you run into situations where things get unpredictable very quickly. Another scenario is where you have side effects. So this seems relatively innocent. We're just updating the person object and setting the name to be whatever we pass in. We're still returning whatever we passed in a predictable way for sure. But if anything else wants to use that person object, it's been mutated in perhaps, again, an unpredictable way. So this doesn't necessarily make the function itself unpredictable, but it can make the rest of your application unpredictable. So these are really trivial examples, but they're really all I think is needed to highlight some of the merits of what a pure function is and isn't. And if you bring this to a larger application where you want to have a function always behave the same way, and you want it to have a certain set of concerns, which is given an input always returns an output. You don't want it to have side effects. You don't want it to rely on anything else. Pure functions give you that simplicity. So before I relate this to UI components and why it's a really good idea to take place there, I want to just walk through a little history of front end. And there's a certain couple parts of this that I think are really relevant. So starting just a little bit way back, 15 years ago or so, there was a post-back model where everything happened on the server. And when you changed something in the UI or did something, it would post back to the server, get a whole new page. So if you're like clicking on a slideshow, you'd click next photo, and they would go back to the server and get the next photo, the next HTML doc, and send it all back down. And it was very, very heavyweight. But then we started doing things with jQuery, and it actually didn't take jQuery to do this, but jQuery was one of the tools that really enabled us to make some of those pages a lot more interactive. So we click next, it would just slide in the next image and just do a little bit of dynamic stuff. We even started getting into like going back to the server or doing some light kind of application work with jQuery. And kind of one of the tools that we use to make it easier to do things with jQuery is client-side templating. So templating was, and the tools used for client-side templating had actually been around and used on the server side for a while, for some of those post-back days. When we brought them to the client side, there's something interesting I realized about what we had back in like 2008, 2009 with client-side templating. Here's an example in Mustache. So you have this idea of a template, and you take some data object, and when you pass that into a template or something that renders that data to the template, it gives you some text that has the data bound to the template. Interesting thing about this, I don't have the sample code, but if you compile these templates to make them, say, performant on the front end, so they don't have to do all the work on the fly, they actually compile to pure functions that just take the data object in as an input, and then just do a bunch of string concatenation, pulling out the keys off the object and putting them into the template. So we actually had these pure functional UI components a while ago, but I think we started to lose sight of them, especially as we got into single-page apps. So we started getting into building this rich UI where you don't need to go back to the server for any more HTML docs. You have this single page You do everything there. And it was great for users. It was great to be able to click on something, have an immediate response or have an immediate kind of feedback. And even if I had to go back to the server, you could do things to make sure that the user had a good user experience. And it definitely meant something that was more interactive, more usable, and just all around better. But with that came a lot of complexity. As we put more and more into the browser, tried to do more and more in JavaScript, we started seeing our page loads slow down. We started seeing it take longer to just send all the data down to the client, take longer to render the page, take longer when you click on something for something to happen. And actually, worst of all, it took longer for us to develop something that was actually useful. I've worked in so many hundred thousands of lines of JavaScript, and it's crazy the behemoths that we have that are single page apps these days to do some things that aren't that complex. But before you know it, you've got tons and tons of code. So one of the things I think spun out of this that is absolutely for the better is we started to move towards component-oriented UI, component-oriented design, and component-oriented architecture. What that is basically taking some UI, breaking it down into smaller pieces. And this is an example from the Facebook blog post on Thinking in React, which I recommend to everyone. But you can take some UI we have this product list that we can search on, and you want to break this down into smaller pieces. So from there, you have this tree of components that starts with, at the top level, this filterable product table. We have a table of products that we can filter on, and within that, in the blue box, we've got a search bar. Within the light green box, we've got a product table, and then there's a couple of child components. There's the category rows, and there's the product row. So we start to break things down into small pieces, and this is a really, really useful thing. Just breaks down our UI to something simpler and easier to manage and easier to think about. So one of the ideas that we had for a while that we thought was really great and fun was this idea of encapsulation, and be able to take all these things that a given component needs to do and just encapsulate everything within that component. And encapsulation isn't all bad, but I think we took it a little bit too far in some cases with our UI components, especially when we started doing things like fetching data from those given components. That's a bit heavy and a bit too much to throw into those components, but I've done it. I've seen it done a lot, and when you have a lot of components going on, you're fetching data in multiple places, it gets pretty crazy pretty fast. Even if you're not fetching the data or dealing with data updates from your component level, managing state. Managing your application state, managing the state of the UI itself, having all those things together, it gets crazy fast. Maybe you're dealing with data normalization. Maybe you're pulling data in and then you're normalizing it in your component. There's a lot of things you can get into there that can be really troublesome. If your components are just updating the application state itself, if you're updating the state of your UI from so many places, it can get unwieldy where that code lives. And ultimately, the UI component needs to render some UI. That as well is just another concern. So for a while, we thought it was a great idea to encapsulate all these things into this magical Lego that we could just stack up a bunch of Legos and put them next to each other and have this application that's wonderful and workable. But I've seen that quickly unfold from very, kind of like, hey, this is great. We just throw components everywhere and they're encapsulated. But as soon as you light a match, it all blows up in flames. I've seen applications get really slow with lots of data fetches. I've seen them become really unwieldy with everything managing their own state. I've also seen it become really, where's it going with this? I'm not sure. I'll just keep going. But yeah, so it's not such a great idea because you have too many concerns in these components. They're not just UI components. You start to commingle the application bits with the UI bits. And when you have rendering of UI, managing a state, and any kind of like where you're getting your data, you have all these different things going on. You have too many concerns happening in a given component. And that makes it really hard to test. You need to start having to mock out data services, or you need to mock out, you need to mock other things out. And it gets, you don't have Legos anymore that you can just drop and place in other places. You can have something really simple like a drop down, but if you're encapsulating too much in that component, like where its data came from, what kind of data it is, or how it's being used. You start giving that application context or what it means to the application. You can't take that and put it elsewhere. And there's ways to mitigate this, but you're always fighting against these challenges. And even when we're working in React, you can still like fall into these pits where you put too much into a component. And that's not bad at first, but you have to be really careful to figure out how to tease that apart in a reasonable way. And you don't want your component to can only do one thing. You want to keep it flexible. So one of the tools that we've had in the React ecosystem is this concept of smart versus dumb components. Dan Abramov talks about this, a few other people, a lot of people. They call them different things. But it's the idea of taking the things that know about states and like our application top level component. It knows about what's going on in the application. It knows where it maybe doesn't even need to manage the state, but it knows where state lives and where it is managed, and it's aware of those things. Those smart components should have very little or no UI to them. They might have some like divs or such, but they're really not about rendering inputs or text fields or input or buttons. That's what the dumb components are for. So we start to tease out the things that are application aware, stateful, to the things that are presentationally oriented. They're just the UI. They're really just about rendering things. Example would be like just a text field or an input or a button. And that button doesn't know that it's a submit. It just knows that it has to display some text. And when it's clicked, it bubbles that event up to something that is aware of application state, something that is smart, knows what to do with that. So breaking our components out into smaller pieces. So I'm going to kind of bring this all together now of how pure functions kind of really apply to components. And React gives us a really good way of doing this. So with React components, we had create class initially. Then with ES6, we got the class syntax, which just gave us a first class way of expressing, hey, we've got this idea of a component class. And we extend the React components. And we can have a constructor. And in this case, we just initialize a state that's empty and then render something based on props. And this is actually a pure function, even though state lives in it somewhere, because we're not mutating state, and we're not even relying on state in any given way. So if we wanted to invoke this, we would just have some JSX with hello and then the prop for name and pass in Amelia. And so then that would just return the paragraph tag with hello Amelia, very similar to that pure function we looked at before. Well, React took it a step further. They had this in the React Future repo for a long time, and then I think it was like a year and a half ago, late 2015, they actually brought it into mainline React, this idea that you could just define a function, and all it does is take props in as an input, and instead of a render, it's just returning a value. So it's basically the render function. And it doesn't have anything to do with state at all. It doesn't have any of the lifecycle methods. It's just a pure function. So you don't need to necessarily do this, but if you have a pure component that isn't stateful, doesn't rely on anything else, you can just distill it into this. And I really like how React took this and made it the first example. If you go look at the components and props page, which is like the page that is all of what React really is, they just say, hey, here's how you do a functional component. And if you want to break that out into something that's got a class, here's the other example. Oh, and here's some lifecycle methods you can hook into. Here's how you can set state and work with that if you need to. But if we're breaking those stateful things out into our smart components, and if our functional UI components are just rendering the DOM, we can get that benefit of separating our concerns properly, of just having what is essentially our templates, again, and the things that know how to render UI down at the functional level, the pure functional level, not manage our state elsewhere. Something I didn't really talk about was there's even further we can take. We can take the functional concept even further. Redux does this. We're saying, hey, we want to manage state in a really manageable way. And there's this idea where given something that happened, data came back from the server, or somebody clicked on, a user clicked on a button, we can have this action fired. And then we can just pass all those actions into a giant switch statement, and then that will call out to individual pure functions. That's what the reducer pattern is all about, is you have these pure functions that given the application state, given a payload data of they clicked this button or some data came back from the server, we can, per reducer, figure out how to update that state and just return a new global state. So React and the React ecosystem has it through and through these functional concepts. You don't need to get into ClojureScript or Elm necessarily. They're not bad by any means, but you can apply them very directly to our code today with just React, with just JavaScript, just with pure functions. Just start there. And I would say next steps, look at things like iterators and iterables with map, and look at reduce, and look at what an iterable is. It's not just arrays anymore. And there's some really neat things you can start to do without getting into another language. Just within JavaScript, with ES6 and ES7 a lot, or even ES5, a lot of these things came into the language. So kind of bring it home with some of the functional benefits. So we talked about separating those concerns properly, separating what's specific to our app and what are those stateless pure UI components. One of the neat things that I see a lot now is people are creating libraries of these UI components. I know we built one at CA just to use on the applications there. We're building one here at Crown Peak. It's actually called Magnum. Not related to Zoolander. I think it was actually named after something else. Magnum PI maybe. But I thought of that today. So we have these, I would also throw out there Material UI. If you're into material design, there's a really good React library there. There's a few others, but you can actually take these component libraries that are pure UI components and use them in your applications and just write the application bits, which I think is really powerful. One of the great benefits is we make our UI testable. I remember like 5-6 years ago, we didn't write tests for our UI because we just said, oh, it's too hard. There's so many things to worry about. You needed to render to a browser back then. You don't need to do that anymore. You can do shallow renders. You can use tools like Enzyme and Jest and do headless rendering to where you don't need a browser to do these things. So you get away from that whole integration testing problem of using Selenium and an actual browser. You can do this with just Node and JavaScript. And you get things where, so taking that hello example, only one test for that. It's just to make sure that it returns hello Amelia, or whatever text it was given, it says hi to that text. And here's an Enzyme example that does a shallow render, which means if it did have children, it doesn't render any of those children. It just tries to render itself. Here it's actually taking it, using the HTML to get the HTML string, and just comparing the string literal value of what it would render to. In any of these pure UI components, we might have a few more cases. It's okay to have logic in our UI components. We can have conditionals and things like that. We can even have loops. Imagine that. It's just as long as we don't have any kind of external mutable state or create side effects, that's what keeps our components pure. Another great benefit that I've heard talked about initially in the React ecosystem is we can compose components. We can take this larger app component and compose that out of smaller pieces. It's funny, I didn't realize it at first, but that actually, I think it parallels, and it must have come from composing functions. Because there's this concept in functional programming where you take one function that does one thing and another function that does another, and you can take them and just put them together into another function that's higher order that is composed of those functions that does something else entirely. So we've been doing that with React components. And it's the same concept here where this kind of brings it kind of full circle where you've got a function component hello and a function component app. An app is literally composed of another function hello. And it's saying hi to Amelia and Diane. So it's something we've kind of had in React and maybe taken for granted. And I just love how I really think React has taken functional programming and brought it to the masses. And they weren't even like secretive about it. They're like, by the way, we're going to teach you some ClojureScript. You just don't know it yet. By the way, we're going to bring in immutability, and you're going to realize how immutable objects are a really great idea. And you can just take the parts that apply to your application that make sense to you and bring them in your applications today. So I hope I've given you some ideas about what functional programming is really about just making more awesome code that's a lot simpler, that's a lot more fun to work with. that's easier for yourself to look at the next day and not want to rewrite it into something simpler, something that's more testable, and it's there's a lot to be had in the functional community, and there's a lot to get into. But don't feel like you need to go all the way into the deep end and pick up Elm or ClojureScript or anything else like that. There's a lot right in JavaScript, and there's definitely a lot right in React and the ecosystem that just go one step deeper every day, and it's not so bad. I used to be really put off by a lot of these functional concepts, looking at very functional languages, and it didn't make a lot of sense to me. Nowadays, some of it still doesn't make sense to me, but I can still write very functional code commingled with object-oriented. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. So that's all I have. Please give me feedback. You can find me on Twitter at WillsLab, on the Denver Dev Slack at Will Klein. Come talk to me afterwards. Tell me what you liked about this. Tell me what you'd like to hear more about and how I can make this better. Please. Thank you. Question.
Before you stand down, I'm kind of curious because I've never done any actual functional myself, but I've had some people say the couple things I've done with functional. When did you know that, I guess, let me try to rephrase this. When you were segueing into functional as something you wanted to do, when did you realize that some of the things that you've done were functional, and how did you realize that?
I want to say when I was writing the pure functions, and it's kind of hard. Let's see if I can describe it. When I would write a pure function, take something that was maybe very imperative and procedural and had side effects, and I started to extract the pure bits into, hey, this can be a function that that gives some input and returns some output, and hey, I can probably use it elsewhere too. And I can start to build utils, and even if I was using it in one place, it became a lot easier for me to write and a lot easier for me to read. And the other, I want to say another thing that was kind of a sign was when I took for loops and I started using iterators like map and just for each, things like that. Even if they were still making side effects or doing other things, I started to see some of that just get cleaner. And yeah, I guess as I started doing more of that. And the other thing I would say is that using map and using reduce initially was kind of foreign to me and felt uncomfortable and it was kind of weird. But then I just became comfortable with it after not too long, just by writing it and seeing more of it. One of the hurdles I would like to kind of throw out there is when you start to bring these things into a code base, probably not so much in a React code base, because I think React brings a lot of it in just by virtue of their examples. But there can be some initial friction of other people on the team that aren't familiar with those concepts. You got to be really careful about how you do that. That's actually a really good speed bump, though, because you don't want to try to bring in too much at once. You want to bring in just enough that you can see the merits of it. And then hold a lunch learn and be like, hey, here's this tool that I brought into our code base. What do you guys think of it? And usually people see how much simpler it is when you give them time to chew on it. They start to use it themselves, and it works out. So I just built comfort up over time, and it wasn't something that I tried to do like overnight. So I think just giving it time and building comfort, that for me was over the course of years. But I don't think it needs to take that long.
I haven't been in it nearly years at this point, but I am curious about I guess the example that I have, because I don't have that many yet, was a situation where I had a variable that was being created through a function, because I knew that the inputs were going to be something that was static. What I needed was going to be something that was going to be created in the function, and then the output I needed to use in something else. But I couldn't go from that first step to that last step without this function in between. So I was like, okay, well, if I just make this function here and then use the output from that, basically store that function in a variable and use that somewhere else, is that more or less along the lines of what functional is? I'm sorry if I sound ignorant.
No, you don't. I think it starts going that direction. A lot of these things, I more than anything, I want people to take away, like, you can head in this direction over time. You don't need to understand more than what a pure function is to start to really grasp it in a concrete way. And you start to find more tools. There's some people like Dan Abramov, Lee Byron, anybody that speaks at the React conferences probably, that have given me a lot of these ideas that exposed me to it. Redux. You get into any of the things that talk about these tools in the React ecosystem, and there's a lot that comes with it of, okay, here's how we can iterate over things in using functions. Here's how we can compose functions. Here's how we can use querying. And you can start, here's how we can create partial functions. There's more and more, but don't try to digest it all at once. So if you can, did a pure function make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. So did the concept of a pure UI component make sense?
Yeah.
Like if you walk away with that, you're going to start just writing cleaner and cleaner code. And I guess there's a lot of places to look for answers. Like look at Ramda, look at what else would people recommend for ideas?
Functional Programming in JavaScript. That's a book that I just started reading, and it's amazing. You like literally look at your code. I know we're galvanized today. Yeah, you look at your code, you're like, oh my god, all this is shit. And you're like, I was just making things work, but now I know. Well, not that I know, but now I can see how to make it like be better and be pure and that kind of stuff. So.
More readable, more separated, all that.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
What did you say that was?
Functional Programming in JavaScript.
There's also
I can't remember the author.
Okay.
Kyle Simpson is the author of I Don't Know JS, like a series of books, and he's just written one called I think Functional Light, and it's all JavaScript based, and it's kind of like intro to a lot of the concepts too. That one might be good. It's open source book, and you can buy a copy, I think.
There's also an online guide called Professor Frisbee's Mostly Adequate Guide to Functional Programming in JavaScript, which is a very long title, but it's just an online book, and it uses Lodash, like the functional part of the Lodash library, so that's I think very similar and just a bunch of very accessible JavaScript-based examples.
Yeah, looking at Ramda, Lodash, or underscore, if you use those tools, they push functional in different ways.
Writing closure helps too. Like, I'm being serious, right? Using a functional language, because that's the only bad part I think about JavaScript is that it lets you write JavaScript that's not functional. Closure, you can do side effecty stuff, but it mainly forces you to write functional programming. And I've always found that whenever I do a story or I do something that makes me write closure and then I walk away from that, I become a 10 times better JavaScript developer.
I could do it. Just curious about open closure, but you
Just curious how much of the functional, like the line of thinking that leads you down that path, how much of that would you say comes out of the basic idea of loose coupling and type cohesion among like any code library, right? I mean, it seems like it's the logical conclusion of I've got this set of things I do. Oh, wait a minute, I can break this up and distill it down along these lines, and you'd end up there regardless of what language you're writing.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely. Yeah, there's some code that I've seen. I remember seeing some C code that wasn't like it was all this one main function that was 100 lines, and right. But the way it was written, the way it was kind of organized, it all could be broken down into smaller functions very easily, and that made me. I just thought of that when you mentioned it. But yeah, you can apply this theoretically to any language, to very object-oriented languages that don't have first-class functions, which are basically being able to pass functions around as like you would variable values. But yeah, if you're trying to loosely couple your code, simplify it, I think it's one of the tools that is really just primed to make that easier.
I was just going to say, it seems to me that all of this exists on the spectrum. So from what you're saying, it's perfectly all right to start with just, JavaScript that just works, doesn't make any sense. At some point you get some concepts around object-oriented. Okay, now I'm doing object-oriented. But like I was saying, I was breaking some of these things down to functions and using those functions as variables. Even though at the time I didn't know I was beginning to do a little bit of functional, I am somehow incorporating a bit of functional, so it sounds like it's perfectly all right to go in that sort of, I guess basically just go in that order.
Yeah.
Just start out just coding and then start building these terms and paradigms around it.
That's one of the reasons why I love JavaScript so much. It's multi-paradigm. You can have objects, you can have functions, you can have them together. And there's ways for it to look bad, there's ways for it to look good. So I don't think it's all or nothing. You just over time go down that route. At some point, you can say, this is enough. I don't need to make it any more pure than this. And I've got enough simplification out of my code and to get the benefits. All right, I'll wrap it at that. Thank you.